Shove it, man!
Happy weekend to all of the brick to the head boys. You know, there's one thing that makes the Hawks squawk more than anything else, and that's the ladies. Specifically the TNA Knockouts. But this isn't a video about them. This is a video about the women of TNA pre-Knockouts division. Hopefully I can throw in one or two surprises in here. But once the video ends, let me know if you remembered all of them or if I've missed any out. If anything, making this video has reminded me more than anything that we still do not have access to NWA TNA Explosion. I desperately want to watch Disco Inferno versus Pogo the Clown. But there are quite a few women who only wrestled Explosion matches, and therefore there isn't much point including them as there's no footage. If you just want to sit here staring at pictures of someone's ass, be my guest, but I'm not going to do it. Somebody sort it out. TNA certainly didn't take women's wrestling seriously at first. I mean, for God's sake, Miss TNA Bruce, who is a man by the way, or at least I think he is, was the second ever Miss TNA champion. This went on for months as well. WWE wasn't serious about women's wrestling at the time, and nor was TNA prior to the Knockouts. And when I say the TNA Knockouts division, I go from Bound for Glory 2007 when Gail Kim was crowned the first ever TNA Knockouts champion. I know some ladies rocked up a few months earlier, but you could shut up or I'll smack you one. In no particular order, here are the ladies of TNA pre-Knockouts division. Francine. Just the 3 TNA appearances for Francine. It seemed at first like TNA was planning on turning her into a main character. She had quite the prominent spot on the first few shows. The highlight was her being blamed for ECW going bankrupt, getting stripped, tricking Ed Ferrara into thinking she was interested in him, and walking around at ringside hitting people with a belt. She actually holds the honour of competing in the first ever woman versus woman singles match in TNA against Taylor Vaughan. She also got a DDT by the Blue Meanie and did a broken neck angle. She wasn't seen again in TNA until 2010 when she appeared at Hardcore Justice 2010, the ECW reunion show. She appeared via satellite at her home and she said she was done with wrestling and focusing on being a mother. April Hunter. She's more of a porn star than anything, but apparently she was quite the wrestler before suffering a bad injury. Just the 3 TNA matches for April, with 2 coming pre-knockouts. She was in the second ever woman versus woman singles match in TNA. She seemed to be trying to earn a TNA contract for years, but they never seemed to quite want her. Quite bizarre for a company called TNA, don't you think? Nowadays she seems to make video requests for all sorts of things. Whatever pays the bills, I guess. Tracy Brooks. Tracy was never much of a wrestler in this Hawk's opinion, but it's a fact that she was all over the TNA show for a number of years. When she first turned up in TNA in 2003, there wasn't really many women around for her to wrestle, so she mostly competed against the men. You'll see that as a trend on a few entries on this list. She seemed to be fighting Kid Cash a lot, which seemed a bit harsh. She was also David Young's valet, so it didn't really start out well for her. She had a very short-lived team called Bitch Slapped, which was cancelled quicker than a lamb can shake its tail. She was Michael Shane and Shane Douglas's valet. That's 2 Shanes. She also tried to be Dusty Rhodes' assistant, but mostly just argued in the back of a pickup truck. After managing a bunch of other people, she started her most notable run. She was the assistant to Robert Roode, Ms. Brooks. He mostly talked down to her and pressured her into having sex very young. She played the part of Knockout Law next, which was supposed to manage the TNA Knockouts. She also filled a spot in the main event Mafia. After that, she was Karen Jarrett's assistant, and then she was a referee. Basically, she did a hell of a lot of stuff in TNA without really doing anything of note. Outside of the ring, she was the first TNA wrestler to pose for Playboy, but they decided the pictures weren't good enough and released them online instead. Nowadays, she's married to Frankie Kazarian. Desire. The baby mama of Sonny Siaki. It's kinda cool how that happened because she was originally brought into TNA to manage Siaki in Vince Russo's SEX faction. From there, the two feuded with Kid Cash and Trinity for what seemed like an eternity. It got a bit sickening seeing this never-ending feud. She broke her back in a dart match, but I'm not exaggerating, she had 11 TNA matches and 7 of them involved Trinity. Desire was not the polished wrestler that Trinity was, but she did smile a lot, so she made you forget about it. After the broken back, she was uncomfortable taking bumps in the ring, and that spelled the end of her wrestling career. She ended up gaining a lot of weight and going on the Biggest Loser USA, and then she ended up losing it all again. Jacqueline. Yes, she was in TNA well before the Knockouts division formed. She wrestled at Victory Road 2004 answering an open challenge against Trinity. At this point, she's just come off a run as the Cruiserweight Champion in WWE. She did lose the match, but in 2 years' time she would become a TNA regular as a wrestler and as a valet for James Storm and Beer Money. Ryan Shamrock. Really bizarre entry here. After leaving the WWE, she appeared on the first episode of TNA. She kept walking up to wrestlers and taking their money. The whole storyline was dropped and she left TNA before any of it could be explained. So why have I included her on the list? Well, she was technically a female performer on TNA, but she was a completely pointless one. Serelda. Well, if you're looking for any funny bread-related puns here, you won't get one, except she can be found in most supermarkets up and down England. Does Canada have Hovis? I don't know, but they do have the next closest thing, which is Serelda. She originally got hired by TNA along with John Bolin in the original TNA Gut Check before it became something else. She had to do 50 sit-ups to get her contract. She was first sighted in the crowd at Bound for Glory 2005. At this point, TNA had really scaled back again on women's wrestling. There were so few females in the company that she was inserted into the feud between AJ Styles and Daniels and AMW and Gail Kim. She became the enforcer for Styles and Daniels as she towered over both of the small men. She didn't really do much except wear cheap-looking clothes from Sports Direct. Her offense was very basic and she didn't seem to have a personality. I'm not kidding you when I say that she barely existed. So she was a bag of Hovis with biceps. After 4 matches, 3 were pay-per-views, TNA chucked her in the bin. The bread bin, that is. Angel Williams. Yes, this is Angelina Love, who of course wrestled a lot as a TNA knockout, but I don't think it was a cop-out including her here. She wrestled a couple of times in 2004, long before the Beautiful People existed and long before this hawk became jealous of the middle rope. You all know her story, but she joined TNA properly in 2007 and went on to be a 6-time Knockouts champion, so I think she did okay for herself, don't you? She's in ROH nowadays. Bella Donna. Another really early inclusion here. She perfected the goth look before Daphne in my opinion. She turned up in the TNA Asylum days, hanging around with Father James Mitchell and his New Church faction. She was a good fit in the grimy looking early days of TNA. She mostly interjected herself into matches against America's Most Wanted and took some painful looking bumps for them. Her biggest moment probably came in a handicap bull rope match against America's Most Wanted. Lots of male on female violence in this video. She was released during the storyline. They just stopped booking her. Anything else? Well, one good and one bad. She had cracking legs. So that's the good thing. What's the bad thing? Well, sadly she passed away in 2019. I personally think she could have done a lot in wrestling. Alexis Laree. Okay, really it's Mickie James, isn't it? But back in 2003 she had a long way to go before becoming hardcore country and she was just a goofy kid. But hold your hawks, we need to rewind even further back, because she was on the 2nd ever episode of TNA in that oh so famous Lingerie Battle Royal. She then disappeared for ages but had a brief feud with Trinity on her return. Then she joined The Gathering, which was a faction led by Raven with CM Punk and Julio De Niro. Not long after that, it was off to the WWE she went. She would come back to TNA in 2010 to become a 3-time knockout champion. Nowadays she's married to Nick Aldis and she wrestles with him in NWA. Athena. For this one I have to say I'm surprised that she didn't go further in the wrestling business, because to say she was popular with the fans in the Asylum is an understatement. Athena was the original TNA ring girl way before SoCal Val rocked up. It was weird for a new viewer because you kept seeing all these well-made signs in the crowd for her, but as a viewer at home you had no idea who she was. She was a wrestler prior to TNA but suffered a bad injury in a match against Stacey the Cap Carter and never fully recovered, so she didn't do much in the ring going forward. Once Vince Russo became an on-screen character, she was quickly utilised on TV, but not very well. He mostly just used her to get the crowd booing him because she was so popular, so abusing her should get a reaction. Unfortunately, it never went much further than that for her. She would appear in a segment, get abused and then disappear. It was really cringy abuse as well, dead sexist. She did eventually wrestle in 2 matches, and when I say wrestle, take it lightly. She also managed David Young before he turned on her, and she never got any payback for that. Then one day, TNA decided to stop booking her and she never got to live up to her potential. It's a shame because the amount TNA paid Christy Hemme to do the same job is enough to make your eyes water. Holly Wood. She wasn't very good.
Stop it, man!
Kinda reminds me of Stacey the Cat Carter. She was randomly brought into Vince Russo's SEX faction and mostly stood around doing nothing. Like the other woman around this time, she endured a lot of early 2000s abuse. Nowadays, I have no idea where she is or what she's doing. She isn't exactly famous. She doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Goldilocks. The sarky, moody, fed-up looking Goldilocks was a consistent part of the early days of TNA. She conducted all of the backstage interviews and had to put up with lots of abuse and wrestlers like Sonny Siaki hitting on her week in, week out. She became quite enjoyable because she usually gave as good as she got. She could certainly look after herself in this environment. In 2005 things changed and she started a new heel role where she would win wrestlers' contracts. She ended up with Alex Shelley, Abyss and Siaki amongst others. She was doing a pretty good job overall, but then she got fired. According to her, it was something to do with Abyss and rumours that Goldilocks would sue TNA if she took a bad bump. Basically, she didn't want to do the Black Hole Slam due to a health condition, and it turned into rumours that Goldilocks would sue them. It all worked out alright for her though, because she ended up making some of the TNA theme songs and she does all her band music stuff as well. Taylor Vaughan. I have no idea what Taylor Vaughan did to get a prime spot in the first 3 episodes of TNA, but it sure didn't last. Taylor Vaughan was the former BB from the Attitude Era in WWE. That run wasn't exactly successful either. A little factoid for you is that she was fired from the WWE after playing around with Hardcore Holly while he was married and causing him to get a divorce. Then she went to the WCW for a cup of coffee as Alan Funk's manager. Then she was involved with him again in TNA. She appeared in 3 episodes. She won the first ever Miss TNA crown in a lingerie battle royal. Then she lost it to Alan Funk, aka Bruce, and then she was gone from TNA. That's about it, a short, pointless run. And dare I say it, was she the most forgettable woman from the WWF Attitude Era? Let me know in the comments down below. Lollipop, Cheerleader, Valentina, and Nurse Veronica. I'm just grouping these 3 together because they pretty much did nothing but fight amongst each other. Lollipop was the most famous of the TNA cage dancers. She seemed to end up getting a spot on TNA each week. Well, eventually she got even more time as TNA turned into some sort of wrestling fetish show. They had the 2 cage dancers fight with Cheerleader Veronica and Nurse Valentina. This group was known as Bitch Slap and nobody remembers them because they did nothing. Why she was dressed as a nurse I have no idea, but apparently this girl was trained by Shawn Michaels. What did he teach her? What else to add? Lollipop appeared topless on an episode of TNA once. My research also tells me that Nurse Veronica beat Daisy Hayes in a match on TNA Explosion, where the loser would have to wear a diaper. Guess what? I have no footage of that because nobody does. Am I making my point clear enough? April Pennington. I could have grouped her in with the last lot, but I won't because she did a bit more than them. April played the on-screen role as Brian Lawler's girlfriend. It was really weird because his jealousy would cause him to have a mental breakdown, getting worse each week. Eventually it did lead him to fake a heart attack on TV. He was right to be jealous though because she was sleeping with X-Pac. Then she changed her mind and said Pac forced her and raped her. Then this was not mentioned again. And then she went back to Lawler. But then she went back to Pac. And then she went to Bruce. What? It turned out Bruce wasn't actually gay and he was doing stuff with her in the shower. I can't speak about this anymore, I'm moving on. Daphne.
Oh, man!
Not much needs to be said here, it's just a one-off match. She appeared in that ever so famous lingerie battle royal on the 2nd ever TNA episode and she was announced as Erin. What kind of a name is that? I barely even know which woman is her. She looks so far removed from the Daphne character. She would wind up in TNA properly in 2008 and let me tell you, she didn't enjoy it very much. Priscilla. Not much is known about Priscilla, except she had a kick-ass body and a kick to the head face. She first appeared in the Miss TNA Battle Royal, but didn't do very well. She rocked up back in TNA a couple of months later and was now the valet of Jorge Estrada, a talented wrestler who TNA didn't know what to do with after the Flying Elvises ran its course. It didn't lead anywhere and she was last seen with Brian Lawler after he cried to her. There you go guys, show some emotion. You know that hot blonde in the leggings that you see every morning in the gym? Go up to her and scream in her ear and rub your tear face all over her. The Hawk guarantees by the 6th tier drop she'll be climbing on top. Trinity.
Shove it!
Now we're talking. This was one of the only legit female wrestlers in the early days of TNA. She was all over the show, but not just on the mic, but also in the ring. I don't think she gets enough credit for what she did in TNA. She succeeded as a legit wrestler when 99% of the women were viewed as nothing but eye candy. Unfortunately for her, she probably came around 5 years too early in TNA when she didn't have enough proper competition. This meant she ended up having to fight the men. The only woman she regularly faced was Desire and it felt like that happened a lot. They were either bickering backstage or battering each other in the ring. She also tried to become Dusty Rhodes' assistant and argued with Tracy Brooks in a pickup truck. She had a legit look and she could wrestle, so she found her way into the WWE on the ECW brand. Unfortunately, she suffered a bad injury and had to step back from wrestling. Luckily for her, wrestling was not her only talent as she is a professional stunt woman. I had no idea how many TV shows and films she's been a part of. Jesus. She's also highly educated and can dance and teaches aerobics. I guess she did okay for herself after leaving the wrestling business. There you go guys, don't put all your eggs in one basket, that's the moral of the story. Leilani Kai.
Shove it, Kai!
Just a brief entry here because there's no footage of it, but it's worth a mention. She was in TNA in 2003 and at the time she was the NWA Women's Champion. TNA were putting her matches in the dark spot and not taking it seriously. She actually defended the belt in a dark match. She got so fed up that she started to no-show the TNA shows and they stripped her of the belt. So they could have had a division a lot sooner, just a very bad one. Did I miss anyone out from before 2007? There were some other women who wrestled on only NWA Explosion, like ODB and Mercedes Martinez, but they didn't make a main appearance on the show. Well, I hope I educated you for a change instead of the usual threats to my fans, and if you don't agree with that, I'll smack you with my hands.